I'd like to talk today about an important issue with regard to our environment. We're doing a series on the Laudato Si platform. Pope Francis has encouraged us to reflect and to listen to the signs of our times with regard to the environment because of many of the concerns in terms of stewardship of the earth, many concerns in terms of preserving the gifts that God has given us of air, water, and soil. Uh, One of the issues that has come up is the whole idea of clean air. How can we make our air cleaner? How can we reduce emissions into our air that are leading to global warming and climate change, all sorts of negative consequences? And of course, many of us, as this situation has evolved, just have gotten into just a normal way of living. And now Pope Francis and many of the uh, experts who speak about climate change are asking us to stop and say, well, wait a minute, we've been living this way for a while in the industrial age. Are there consequences to living that way? And what can we do to alleviate some of those consequences? One of the many uh, proposals, ideas, is the idea of transitioning from the gasoline engine to electric vehicles and the importance of having then, of course, electric vehicle charging stations. Because you can just imagine, well, I'm going to do something good for the environment. I'm going to get into my electric car now, and well, wait a minute, it's not going anyplace. It has no power. It's not charged. So, or we're still halfway to my destination, and my charge runs out. What's happening? We've all experienced this with our phones and other devices. You go to use it and there's no charge. And God forbid that happens in a car in the middle of nowhere. Uh, so people are saying, well, what about the charging stations? Well, of course, people are looking into this and trying to do something about it. For example, in New York, there's been 175 million that has been dedicated to installing electrical vehicle charging stations. This is to be done over a period of 5 years. So you can see that this is part of a transition that we are making. It would be hard to do something like this abruptly, to say, well, overnight, no more gas-powered cars, we're going to go all electric. Well, we still have all of these gas-powered cars on the road. What's going to happen to them? And again, that transitioning of those when they no longer work, when they break down and they can't be repaired, and they just get too old. Uh, Again, this transition time. So the electric vehicle charging stations will be installed over a 5 year time. Uh, in our own local counties here of Suffolk and Nassau on Long Island, they are number one in New York for electric vehicle registrations. So there are more electric vehicles being bought in this area than in other areas of the state. Suffolk, for example, as of March 1st of this year, 2022, has had 14,856, and Nassau 12,589. So you can see this is something that is just in the beginning phases, beginning to catch on, and it's going to take time. August 1st was the deadline for New York to submit plans to the federal government as to establishing these stations. 26 million will be spent this year on electric vehicle charging stations. The goal is by 2030 to have 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. So quite a significant goal, quite a significant number. You can see if we have that many, it would alleviate the problem that you could run into of running out of your charge. Currently, there are 115,000 in the United States, and in New York, there are 2,900 of these charging stations. This is from data from the Alternative Fuels Data Center. So there's a whole center that is dedicated to, well, how many, where are they? Let's get moving on this. Let's get them charted. Let's make people aware of these charging stations. China is now the #1 country for electric vehicles. So China has moved quite aggressively in this area, and maybe a little bit easier for them in the sense that they have come into the industrial age at a time when people were buying these vehicles in China in great quantities, and so they could make the transition a little bit easier than in America, where we had a backlog, obviously, of all of these gas-powered vehicles. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm says what we have to do is we have to address the gaps. So we have to look at where we have them, and then where we don't have them, we have to take a look at those gaps. New York State has dedicated $250 million for the Evolve New York program, and that is to have fast charging stations. So naturally, this is what you want because people are driving. They don't want to wait, 8-10 hours to charge their car to resume their journey. They want something that's going to be a little bit quicker, and hopefully it can be done within 20 minutes, a half an hour to recharge their car. The New York goal is 50,000 EV ports for public and commercial use by 2025. 4,745 on Long Island, so that would be extremely helpful. New cars, the goal for new cars is zero emissions by the year 2035 in New York. So this obviously would be very helpful to our environment to have no emissions at all. That is the goal. That's the direction we want to move in. Kevin Miller, who is the Director of Public Policy for ChargePoint, one of the nation's largest operators of EV charging stations. And he mentions that 80% of EV owners charge at home or at work. So again, having one in your own home, very important. Having some at work, very important as well. So these would be two areas to concentrate on. And again, having public ones, very helpful, but also having your own station at home so you can charge it overnight, and then going to work and having a charging station there as well. Most EV vehicles can travel 200 miles without needing a recharge, so that's 200 miles, a pretty substantial number. But again, people who are going on long trips would need those charging stations in public areas and well charted so they can figure out, well, 200 miles, here I am at 150, where's the nearest charging station? Hopefully, it's close enough so that we can recharge. The goal, Miller says, is to make EV chargers to be as prevalent as USB ports. So USB ports were at a premium when the whole tech revolution started, and now, of course, they're very prevalent, and that is the same hope with the EV charging stations. Problem is, of course, very acute on some holiday weekends when there's a lot of traveling, so this would be important to have a number of public charging stations to address that problem. EV sales last year in 2021 were 3%. 400,000 EV vehicles were sold, so you can see how it's moving in that direction, but again, only 3% of sales. The goal is to increase EV sales to 50% by 2030, which could well happen with the increasing number of charging stations. So again, this is a rather significant issue for us as we move forward. It is something that is obviously a concern that is being addressed, and hopefully those EV charging stations will be in place and our air can become a lot cleaner, and we can reduce some of the harmful effects that have led to climate change.